What is crack-a-lack and fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Valley coming at you with a solo mini emergency episode segment because Ja Morant is going to be out for the season. He's having surgery on a torn labrum in his right shoulder. Uh, just a bummer here and changes so much, obviously, for the Memphis Grizzlies, but about the landscape, I think, in the Western Conference. Very quickly, Jeff Stotts in Street Clothes on Twitter says that Morant, uh, the recovery period is normally 156 days. That's a long time. That's about 5 months following surgery, but it comes with a very high success rate. He notes other players to undergo labrum surgery include Jalen Brunson, Pascal Siakam, and Paul George. I believe Paul George has had some subsequent issues with that shoulder, if I'm not mistaken, but he's still an all NBA caliber player, as is Pascal Siakam. And we're seeing what Jalen Brunson can do right now. And so next season, Ja Morant should be fine, and the Grizzlies should be fine. They still have Desmond Bane. They still have Jaren Jackson Jr. Steven Adams will be healthy at that point anyway. They were already a little bit in lurch because of how much ground they lost without Morant. They now cede all of that back. They had the worst offense in the league without him. They didn't generate a ton of rim pressure. They weren't making a ton of threes. Not that he improves your three-point shooting, but that creativity is big. There's no one on this team that is has an unassisted three-point attempt rate of just above 50. So everyone on this team, most of their three-pointers are coming off assists. Having Ja Morant as a creator to put pressure on defenses is huge, in large part because you also do not have the offensive rebounding element that you would have if both Brandon Clark and more so Steven Adams were healthy. You look at this, I think there's been the reactions to this are the two things that bother me is one, calling it a blessing in disguise because this is going to drum up the value of Memphis's first round pick this year. Okay, fine. The Grizzlies have not drafted that well since the Desmond Bane pick. They have some interesting guys on here, but they bet big on their internal development, and that has kind of flopped since then. And they held on to some of their assets too long before the Marcus Smart trade. There was also sort of this, I don't want to say glaring indifference, but people just, not that they've written off Ja Morant or they're rooting for an injury, but just everything down to the finger gun celebration once he returned from his suspension earlier this year. I have been very critical of Ja Morant on a bunch of things, as has Grant on this podcast. This is still a 24-year-old kid, and we should all be rooting for redemption, and we should never be, I don't even want to say no one was rooting for the injury, but we shouldn't have just written him off or view this as something indifferent, that it doesn't change a lot about what the Grizzlies are going to do, because it changes everything about what they can and should, what they will do. They looked like they could be, they probably wouldn't have done anything major, but they could have if he was going to be healthy. They still have their first round picks. They still have some salary matching tools. And they are 4 games out in the loss column of the play-in right now. That's a tall order when most of the teams in front of them are all going to try and make the playoffs. There's a chance Utah pulls back. They're playing out a hellacious stretch right now that takes them through February. They can also be sneaky buyers, though. And so there were no guarantees. And if you're Memphis, this completely flips that on its head. And I don't think, do we see them tank? Maybe. What this really does that's damaging, though, is it really erases any type of information they could have had on, okay, well, how does Ja work with Marcus Smart and Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. together? There's just virtually no sample there for that this season. On the year, those 4 have played 238 possessions together. The Grizzlies are a +4 during that, +4 points per 100 possessions. That's solid. But the offense has been in the 9th percentile. They were doing a lot of their damage on the defensive end, and the half-court offense still wasn't very good. There were things they needed to figure out. And I don't think you can look at this team and think that they are built to navigate the rest of the season without Ja Morant, particularly on the offensive end. I look at Marcus Smart specifically, has been mostly a train wreck there. He is shooting above 55% on his drives. He also has more turnovers than assists on those drives. Some of that could just be his teammates not making shots, and it is to some extent, but he's never been that traditional floor general. He has always needed another creator or two around him to be optimized. Ja Morant might have given you that because you also have Desmond Bane. And you just look at when Marcus Smart is running pick and roll this year, been an absolute disaster. He's scoring 0.6, he's averaging 0.69 points per possession as the pick and roll ball handler. That is an egregiously bad mark. There have been 89 players that have run at least 75 pick and rolls this year. Marcus Smart there's actually only one player that's averaging fewer points per possession in pick and rolls than Marcus Smart, and it's Drew Holiday. That's not sure I saw that one coming. And he's turning the ball over on 27.7% of his pick and rolls. That is dead last by a mile among everyone who has run at least 75 of those. You have Marcus Smart, 27.7% turnover rate there, 89th out of 89 players. And then Josh Giddey checks in at 88th at 22.3%. And so, like, the distance between Marcus Smart and Giddey is basically the distance between Giddey and, like, maybe the bottom, someone who ranks in the 60s, if that. That's a problem. That's not going to go away. And so I look at this team, and yes, because you are Memphis, because you're still playing the long game, if there's a player out there on the trade market that you deem can be a part of your long-term picture, still go out and get them, because that you can protect this year's pick, or maybe other teams are just more inclined to value your pick because of what just happened with Morant. Go out and get them to set yourself up for the longer term, but don't throw good money after bad and try and acquire someone who is going to get you into the play-in or the playoffs, because you're not getting to the playoffs at this point. Just the sheer difference and the teams in front of you to get to that sixth spot. You are right now, as I record this, 8 losses back. And it's just, look at the teams in front of you. Even if you don't believe in Houston, even if you don't believe in New Orleans, even if you don't believe in the Lakers, the Suns, the Warriors, either one of those teams could get hot. The Jazz have been quietly playing really well, but you're not going to reach the playoffs anyway. And so I do think this takes them out if they had been tangentially linked to a Pascal Siakam. And if you were really, let's say you really believe in getting Pascal Siakam, okay, go out and do it, because then if you resign him, he comes back, you could see what he's like with Ja. But not having Ja, I think, really eliminates that possibility of going out and getting someone that they view as a high impact player right away, because you would want to see that fit together before you have to pay someone like Siakam. There could be other names available, but the goal should not be, well, do we all of a sudden look at DeJounte Murray because he's been a bear on offense this year and maybe that could help us get to the play-in? That's not the goal anymore. This needs to be about subsequent seasons and setting yourself up to make another big move. The big move that you really haven't even, I say another big move that you still haven't made. The Marcus Smart consolidation trade is not panned out like it should have. You waited too long to make that type of trade if you're the Grizzlies. So now if I'm Memphis, I'm looking at, again, if the right player became available, if you get your hands on Mikal Bridges, for example, you can't. I'm just using that as an example. Yeah, you go out and do it because that sets you up for the future. At this rate, it's not about, you could keep this core intact. You could play everybody and you're still going to lose enough games you're not going to be on the level of the Blazers or the Spurs, most likely, but lose enough game to have like top 5, 7 lottery odds, and maybe you'll get lucky there. And then that's a pick that you can then move, and that you should move that pick because you have John, Desmond Bane, and Sharon Jackson Jr. right now. What I think you should be doing in the interim, and what you need to do in the interim, is, well, what is the market for Marcus Smart? Because you can't say this experiment that the ship has sailed on it. You don't have enough information at full strength, but it's been underwhelming enough to where you look at the 2 years and 41 plus million left on his deal. He could still be very valuable to certain contenders. I look at what Dallas want to take a shot at him. Someone suggested the Knicks. I think they need more shot creation if they're going to go that route. The Lakers could be a team that might want to get involved if you're willing to take back. Look, you can kind of straddle both sides of the fence. If you're willing to take back D'Lo in that deal and they're going to give you their distant first round pick, you have that extra shot creator in D'Lo. I don't think he leads you to the play-in, and he could pick up his player option for next year. But then that's still sort of a human trade exception type situation if he does exercise that option. And I think that you're not going to get nearly as much as you gave up for Marcus Smart, I don't think. But there are teams that I do believe would give up a first round pick and maybe more for Marcus Smart. I don't know if that team would be the Lakers specifically, because they're only going to be able to give you 2029 or 2030. If that's on the table, you should absolutely be doing it. But there are just other teams that could come in here. I saw someone had mentioned to me Philly. That would just be, it would eat into their cap space. But man, if they're really all about this year, Philly would make some sense. They have all those expiring contracts and some picks. That might be a team where you could watch and see them really doing something there. Brooklyn probably needs more of a floor general type, even though their defense has been a little bit wonky this year. Does Atlanta, do you just like a Marcus Smart, DeJounte Murray challenge trade? I still think that if you're the Grizzlies, you end up having to give up someone as part of that deal. But if you're willing to take back Clint Capella's money, maybe send out some of your other bigs, That's something you could look at. I wouldn't love that one for Memphis, though, quite frankly. You could also look at something like again, if you're trying to straddle two lines, would Charlotte be interested in having Marcus Smart as a culture setter and defender moving forward over Terry Rozier, who's just been playing like gangbusters lately? I mean, I really don't know. Um, Other teams, I don't think this OKC, they're not really a good team, even though he would be, I think, even in the playoffs, an upgrade over Giddy. But the other thing here is Marcus Smart is shooting 33.3% on catch and shoot threes. Other teams know this as well. But if you're really going after trying to make a maybe Houston, they believe with him and Fred Van Fleet, and you're gonna lighten his creation duties because of Şengün, they could really use another creator in there. So there will be teams I think could give up a first round pick for him. And then you also have Luke Kennard, who has a team option for next season. You should look at moving his contract. When he's been healthy, he has these knee problems he has for years. He's going to be someone who could make shots for you, and you need that element. But I think at this point, it needs to be about aiming bigger. And you can call it tanking if you want to tank, and you'll really go right now, you're 2 losses in front of the Blazers, and you're not going to catch up to the Pistons or the Wizards or the Spurs. But if you want bottom 4 lottery odds and you want to go after the Hornets, who have 3 more losses than you, and Portland, who has 2 more losses than you, by all means, you can do that. But it needs to be more about setting yourself up to make the move that you still have not made and what Marcus Smart did not do for you. And that's why I'm looking at moving him, looking at moving Luke Kennard, Brandon Clark. If a team wants to trade for him as some sort of salary matching, that should be on the table. And it's about getting picks back, maybe some young players back. I don't know necessarily what young players are going to be on the table in a Marcus Smart or Luke Kennard deal. I think you're more looking at these protected first round picks. And if it's a team that the Clippers, Marcus Smart could make some sense there. I don't know if they'd be willing. They have PJ Tucker. They have Terrence Mann. I'm not giving up Mann, just given his chemistry with his fit with the Stars, I would say, and his chemistry even with Zubats. I can't get to that point, but they could step ladder their way there. They have Amir Coffey on top of PJ Tucker, and that like right there getting kind of close. You could step ladder your way there. If you're getting a distant first round pick from the Clippers, from the Lakers, then yeah, you absolutely do it. And you can roll that into another trade for when the right player becomes available over the offseason, because there will be a player or players who just fit that you need that will become available. And I think, over the next couple of months or even leading into the offseason, I do think someone like a Larry Marketing or a Mikal Bridges would become available. And if you can arm yourself to make an aggressive play for that player who's a better fit and who really nudges the direction of your team towards that championship ceiling, you need to load up for that, because I don't think you have it in place right now. Even again, though, we haven't seen the full strength Grizzlies a ton. This changes everything about what the season could have been, though, because as we've said on this podcast, what they could have done is, even if they were looking at this as, well, we'll make the play in, we might get bounced before we get to the first round, or we won't even win a playoff series. Because you had Ja Morant, though, anything was on the table, not to make this all-in move for this season. Let's say you could have gotten Larry Marketing. You can't. They just, the asking price in Utah and then based off Memphis's assets. But if you had gotten and went after a Siakam, if someone else had become available that you wanted to look at, because you have Ja Morant, and you could have gauged the fit of whoever you're acquiring with Ja, with Jaren Jackson Jr., with Desmond Bane, all at once, that matters then for your bigger picture. And now that you can't do that, I don't think you should be buyers. If you even want to go after like kind of this lower level, cheaper big, if Andre Drummond can be had and it's not going to cost you a young player, or it's not going to cost you more than some seconds, yeah, sure, go that route. If you can get Daniel Gafford for salary matching in some seconds and you just want to try and tread water without Morant, fine. That the heart and soul of your organization is done for this season. It should be more about trying to set yourself up to make a huge swing once he is healthy and over the offseason. And you have enough room under the luxury tax, like 11 plus million under the tax. You have some players that I think teams would want, even if you're looking at trying to move Santi Aldama or Xavier Tillman before you have to pay him this season. Those are not guys that are going to yield first round picks, but they could be nice sweeteners in, let's say, a Smart trade. Is that going to just drum up your return or loosen the protections on the picks that you're going to get, or the quality of youngsters you're going to get? That's what the Grizzlies need to do right now. It's not about tanking. It's about looking at all their options when it comes to everyone on their roster, not named Ja Morant or Desmond Bane or Jaren Jackson Jr. I would say Ja Morant is truly the only untouchable player here, because we have to redefine what untouchability means in the league. There are only a handful of players who are truly untouchable. But you need to set yourself up to go out in the offseason and make the bigger trade that you never made when you should have in seasons past, that you tried to make this past summer, and it was kind of a half measure somewhere in between. And I do think that you have the players other teams would be interested in. Luke Kennard, Aldama, Marcus Smart specifically, that could get you there. And look, you shouldn't be opposed to, just because you have Marcus Smart on the books for 2 more years and some flexibility, if it's getting some bad money back where maybe it's bad money for this season and next season. That shouldn't be outside. Like, you shouldn't view that as outside the realm of possibility, because if they're going to be expiring next year, but it's not a good contract, that becomes the human trade exception, though, if they're coming off the board, or even if they have 2 years left. And I'm not saying Marcus Smart's on this terrible deal. I'm just using it as an example of, if the player you're acquiring has, including this season, 3 years left on their deal, all of a sudden that's 2 years over the offseason, and they become more valuable as a salary matcher. And so that's going to drum up your level of return, because there are teams concerned about the tax right now. Maybe if the Clippers are looking to get off PJ Tucker, because they don't want his player option on the books for next year, and they're willing to compensate you for that. That is something that you could look at theoretically doing. And maybe PJ Tucker, he's not giving up that money in the player option, so you're not getting to a buyout, but you sort of get the point there. You can look at those avenues as well, because you can turn around and flip those salaries over the summer, because it doesn't matter that they're on your books right now. You have room under the luxury tax. You're not going to be good anyway, and you've probably drove up the return that you were getting in whatever trade you are making. That's what I think they should do. Whether they will do it, we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully Ja Morant makes a full recovery. He will. High surgery success rate. This team is still going to be fun, and it's still a team to keep an eye on in the years to come. If you've not done so already, please hit the subscribe button on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever else you get your podcast. We are there. Ratings and reviews on Apple and Spotify help us out a ton. So please leave those 5-star ratings and then write a review on Apple. It takes 5 seconds, means the world to us, helps us climb up the charts. Follow us on all the socials. The handles and links are in the podcast and YouTube description or on your screen right now. And join our Discord. You can get great conversations. You will get to ask mailbag questions. It's a lot of fun in there. The link to that is in the podcast and YouTube description too. Until next time, and as always, I leave you all with a shout out to the one, the only, the indelible, the legendary, the also injured, but he will be back with a vengeance next season, Frank Ntilikina.